In the year 800, when most of Europe still measured time by bells and seasons rather than calendars, Charlemagne issued a document that did not look revolutionary at first glance. It was not a declaration of war or a religious decree. It was an agricultural order, a practical list, a record of what every imperial estate under his rule was required to grow if it wished to be considered complete. The document became known as the Capitulare de Villis. It named dozens of plants, grains, fruits, vegetables, medicinal herbs, familiar things, wheat, onions, garlic, plants that ensured survival. But hidden within the structure of the text was a subtle hierarchy that modern readers often miss. Most plants were listed by category. Vegetables in one section, medicinals in another, orchard trees somewhere else. But one small group of plants was treated differently. They were not optional. They were not suggestions. They were compulsory. Without them, an estate was considered deficient. In that short, severe section, a single herb appeared among only a handful of others. Not described, not explained. Simply named as if its importance required no justification. Levisticum, Lovage. To Charlemagne's administrators, this plant was not garnish. It was not medicine alone, it was infrastructure, as essential to a functioning estate as tools or storage cellars. A kitchen without lovage was incomplete, in the same way a granary without grain was incomplete. That assumption would have made perfect sense to anyone living at the time. For over a millennium before Charlemagne, lovage had quietly shaped how food tasted across the Western world. The Romans had relied on it so completely that their writers barely paused to explain it. It was simply there, present in kitchens, markets, and military camps from North Africa to Britannia. In the oldest surviving Roman cookbook, attributed to Apicius, lovage appears again and again. More frequently than garlic, more often than onion, even more than salt. It was the base note beneath Roman cuisine, the flavor that made other ingredients make sense. When the Western Roman Empire fractured, much of its agricultural knowledge scattered. But monasteries became vaults of continuity. From Ireland to the Eastern Mediterranean, monks carried cuttings, seeds, and habits with them. Lovage followed. Every monastery garden grew it. Not because it was rare or precious, but because cooking without it felt unfinished. For centuries, no one questioned lovage's place. It was perennial, reliable, deep-rooted. A single planting returned year after year, pushing up thick, hollow stems and dark, glossy leaves as soon as the ground warmed. It survived winters that killed other herbs. It shrugged off neglect. Once established, it demanded almost nothing. And then, within a few decades of the 20th century, it disappeared from American gardens. Not slowly, not because it stopped growing, but because the logic of food itself changed. The turning point did not announce itself with drama. It arrived quietly, wrapped in academic language. In 1919, a monumental reference work appeared, documenting edible plants known across human history. The author treated lovage with respect, noting its ancient cultivation, its versatility, its strength of flavor. Then came a small telling observation. The taste, he wrote, was too intense for modern American preferences. By the 1950s, lovage had slipped out of mainstream American cooking. Seed catalogs still listed it, but quietly. Food writers began referring to it as forgotten, as if amnesia were natural. By the 1970s, it was often described as a celery substitute, a linguistic reversal so complete that the original had been recast as the imitation. This is the kind of buried story that emerges when you look closely at agricultural history, the kind explored by ancestral yields, not to romanticize the past, but to understand what was deliberately left behind. Today, the global celery market is worth billions. Every year, fields are planted, harvested, and cleared. Seeds are purchased again. The cycle repeats. Meanwhile, lovage persists quietly on the margins, in heirloom gardens, in monastery ruins, in the yards of people who never forgot. Because perennials have a different relationship with time. Lovage does not rush. It emerges early in spring, often before other herbs wake. It grows steadily through summer and into autumn. In winter, it disappears underground, conserving energy. Then it returns, unchanged by fashion or market trends. In Europe, abandoned monasteries still host wild lovage plants, growing untended centuries after the communities that planted them vanished. The buildings collapsed, the orders dissolved. The plant remained, There is something unsettling about that endurance. Systems rise and fall. Plants that depend on constant human input vanish with them. Perennials persist. Bringing lovage back does not require innovation. It requires memory. Seeds are still available. Root divisions are easily shared. The plant tolerates cold that kills other herbs. It thrives in rich soil but survives poor conditions. Give it space and it will fill it. The first year is quiet. The roots establish. Harvest lightly. The second year, growth accelerates. From then on, it becomes part of the landscape, a constant presence rather than a seasonal purchase. In a world increasingly aware of supply chain fragility, rising input costs, and soil exhaustion, lovage offers a different logic. Not abundance through extraction, but stability through continuity. Not flavor engineered for mass appeal, but depth built over time. Music softens. The story of lovage is not really about an herb. It is about what kinds of plants our systems reward. Annuals that demand attention and money every year thrive in industrial models. Perennials that offer independence fade into obscurity. Yet the soil has not changed. The plant has not weakened. The only thing that shifted was what we were encouraged to value. Charlemagne did not mandate lovage because it was fashionable. Roman cooks did not rely on it because it was novel. Medieval monks did not preserve it out of sentimentality. They all recognized something practical and enduring. A plant that feeds you for decades from a single act of planting is not a product. It is a relationship. And relationships do not scale the way commodities do. Music fades slowly. Somewhere beneath the noise of modern food culture, lovage is still growing. Waiting, unbothered by its absence from supermarket shelves. Ready to return the moment someone remembers why it mattered. If this story reshaped how you see the plants behind everyday meals, staying curious is the first step. Subscribing is simply a way of continuing that excavation, bringing back what was never truly lost, only buried. It was not an accusation, it was a diagnosis. By the early 20th century, American food was being reshaped for a new purpose. Not nourishment alone, but scale. Uniformity, predictability. Flavor was no longer meant to anchor meals. It was meant to disappear politely, never interfering with processing, transport, or mass appeal. Lovage did not cooperate. Botanically, lovage belongs to the same family as celery, parsley, and carrots. But where celery spreads shallow roots and lives briefly, lovage commits. It drives a thick taproot deep into the soil, anchoring itself for 15, sometimes 20 years. Above ground, it grows tall, often 6 feet or more, forming a living tower of stems and leaves that smell unmistakably of concentrated celery when crushed. Every part of the plant is useful. Young leaves can be eaten fresh, sharp, and aromatic. Mature leaves dry into a potent seasoning that carries through winter soups. The hollow stems can be candied or used as aromatic straws. The seeds flavor bread, cheese, and pickles. The roots, traditionally boiled, were once treated as vegetables in their own right. Nutritionally, lovage is dense. Where modern celery offers crunch and water, lovage delivers vitamins, minerals, and complex plant compounds. Its flavor reflects that density. One leaf can season an entire pot. One stem can define a stock. This was not a flaw in ancient kitchens. It was the point. The Romans understood this completely. They named the plant after the Ligurian region, where it grew abundantly and treated it as a foundational ingredient. Medieval cooks continued the tradition. Monastic records describe lovage not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Food prepared without it was described as flat, incomplete, lacking depth. When Europeans crossed the Atlantic, they brought lovage with them. Colonial gardens grew it. Shaker communities cultivated it extensively, drying leaves, distilling cordials, and selling preparations for both food and medicine. Well into the 19th century, American agricultural surveys listed multiple cultivated varieties. Lovage was not obscure, it was normal. Music shifts almost imperceptibly. The displacement began with a plant that looked similar but behaved very differently. Celery, once a bitter wild herb, began to be selectively bred in Europe during the 19th century. Farmers focused on traits that markets rewarded: thicker stalks, upright growth, milder flavor, techniques like blanching, shielding stalks from sunlight, reduced bitterness further. The result was a vegetable that was palatable to nearly everyone and offensive to no one. By the turn of the 20th century, celery production scaled rapidly. Fields in Colorado and Michigan expanded. Labor-intensive methods gave way to mechanization. Celery's greatest advantage was not taste. It was predictability. Stalks grew to similar sizes. Fields matured together. Machines could harvest, sort, and pack efficiently. Lovage refused to conform. It did not mature on command. It did not grow uniformly. It invited continual harvesting rather than a single mechanical pass. Its deep roots resisted extraction. Its flavor shifted subtly with season and leaf age. For industrial systems built on sameness, Lovage was chaos. But the deeper issue was economic, not agricultural. Annual crops create recurring demand. Seeds must be purchased every year. Fields must be replanted. Inputs flow continuously from supplier to grower. Perennials break that cycle. A farmer who plants Lovage once does not return to the seed catalog for over a decade. Neighbors share divisions. Seeds fall and germinate on their own. From a business perspective, this is a dead end. By the mid-20th century, the celery industry had become enormously profitable. Hybrid varieties, protected by intellectual property, ensured that seeds could not legally be saved. Entire supply chains grew around a plant that dies each year on schedule. Lovage, which simply kept growing, did not fit. Music becomes more reflective. This pattern is not unique. Again and again, perennial foods were sidelined, not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well. They reduced dependency, they undermined repeat sales. They encouraged self-sufficiency. In this way, the disappearance of Lovage was not accidental. It was selection, economic rather than ecologica.